Hello there, community. Welcome to You Want Answers. Today is April Fool's Day, and I had this big, elaborate plan. My teenage son, who is my mini-me, I mean, no joke, we did one of those face aging things that allows you to age, a young person and de-age an older person. And it was scary how much like we kind of looked alike in that. So anyway, the big elaborate plan was I was going to have him kick off the show pretending to be me and just sit here and then like 30 seconds in, dude, what are you doing? And it's like, Dad. Anyway, it was going to be a lot of fun and totally blew it because we're going on vacation today. We're heading down to the Rocket Center down in Huntsville, and so half the family's already gone, and he went in the early car, and so we were going to get him filmed, and just with packing and cleaning and family coming in and all that. We didn't get it done, and he's on the road, and I'm like, dude, we didn't film. So such is life. You're just stuck with me today, like you are every time on You Want Answers, but hopefully that is not a bad thing. So today we're going to talk a little bit about some certification things like we always do, and then dive into some Q&A stuff out on DevCentral and some questions from the articles. And so before we do that, I wanted to promote upcoming show. We're going to have Securing Modern Apps and Microservices with Nginx. Tyler Hatton from WWT is going to join us again. We've done Terraform and Ansible Labs, and those were great shows. If you haven't seen those, go check them out. He's going to be back with us on Tuesday, not our normal Thursday show. We'll take care, or we'll launch that at 10 a.m. on the 6th. And then John and I, of course, are back here next week for DevCentral Connects. And then, in the future, if you have not registered for Agility yet, it's April 20th through the 22nd, and it's free. And I know you hear free, and it's like, oh, well, it's not going to be very good if it's free. You got the psychology of free going on. But it really is valuable content. Not only are you going to get some great breakout sessions, but the labs, which we've always traditionally charged for, are going to be free. And I know our SE and our SA community have been busting their tails. I've been seeing the Git commits coming in for all the labs. You really don't want to miss it. So get signed up, and we'll see you there, Agility, on the 20th to the 22nd. Got a question here from Sushant and Josie. Best way to prepare for the 201? Get on the console. Log in to Big IP. You can book study. But nothing's going to take the place of actually getting your muscle memory, both just your analytical skills of looking at how things work practically. It's one thing to read things off of a piece of paper, and it's another to see it work in front of you, looking at TCP dumps and really understanding how pools and load balancing and monitors and all of that stuff works. Of course, the TCP dump stuff will be more 301B. So it's a little bit further down the road, like, even starting at the 201 level, it's going to pay off big dividends down the road by spending the time in TCP dump. You will not be sorry for having spent a lot of time. In fact, I did a packet capturing class way back in the day, and my teacher in that, he's like, really, if you're not in the wire traces 15 minutes a day, you're already losing skill. And that's totally true. If I go away for even a week, it's like, what is HTTP again? I mean, it's not that bad, but it's pretty bad how fast that goes. So Sushan, hopefully that answers your question. Also, we have a lot of resources out on I think it's there's a support solution. I'll link it in the show notes at the end. But there's a blueprint, there's a study guide, F5 certified group out on LinkedIn. Will definitely have feedback for you on how best to prepare for the 201. And and of course, you've got the practice test out there as well, so you can kind of gauge where you are. And if you do pretty well on the practice test, that's an indicator that you might do pretty well on the full test. It's not a guarantee or anything, but that'll help. Okay, so today we are going to let's get into this. So I'm going to bring up my deck. Not in that view. Let's make me small and the content big. And where did that come? I don't know why. See, I'm having a tooling problem here. I've got multiple monitors, and PowerPoint just does not behave very well. I really wish it would behave better than it does. But you have multiple monitors, and you play your presentation, and it'll show, like here, it's showing my my window at the top, and I don't know why it's not going full screen, even though it's in presentation mode. So anyway, you'll have to deal with my problems today. I'm working on getting my tooling set up, and it should be in better shape down the road. Here's feedback from, I'm guessing that was my good friend Peter Silva helping out there in the chat. And where those, there's the exam and study materials. It's a knowledge article 299-00360. Thank you, Peter. And then before we jump into this, why is there no official F5 official training for F5 or for the 401? The documents available now is for V1, any materials for V2. I don't know why there's no official training for that. I can get with Dr. Ken and Heidi and get that answer for you, Jill. If I learn anything that's not, it just hasn't, nobody's made it a priority at this point, then, I don't really have much to add to that. But if there's good reasons and things on the way that might be helpful, I'll get that to you in the show notes. It might not be today, but I'll track that down for you. And then also, Peter, you dropped in the LinkedIn group. There you go. Yeah. Group 85832. Great group. Lots of good questions in there. And on that note, that's a good segue, actually, because yesterday I was out there perusing the group, and it just hopped right over. Eric Ekman posted out there, and he's studying for the 301B right now. And so he shared out his study notes. And so that's a great way to ingratiate yourself to any community, is it's sharing, right? We're all here to help each other. And Eric, shout out to you for not just, taking the time to, really dive in and learn all the material so that you can get certified, but also sharing that out to the community. Because, some people are of the mindset. I used to work with a guy who was like, I'm not sharing anything because it's job security. If I hold on to everything myself, then I don't have to worry about losing my job. And, that might be true in a very, micro perspective. But, at the end of the day, I like the perspective of, I always want to prepare everybody else around me to do my job, because I may not want to do the job I'm doing forever. And if I leave, I want to leave everybody in a good spot. And so, my goal everywhere I've been, and I've had some good mentors in front of me who taught me the way. It's like, share everything that you know, because not only is training other people, it solidifies, your own understanding of concepts if you teach them. And so it's good for you to pass on and share with others. So I just wanted to give Eric a shout out. And because he's studying the 301B, I thought maybe we would spend some time talking about TCP, because I took the 301B. Of all the tests, it was probably, I wouldn't say it's necessarily the hardest test, but it's the hardest test to finish if you want to finish all of the questions. And so, thanks, Peter, for studying those or sharing that link. It's a hard test to finish because there's a lot of analysis. It's not just rote memory where you're looking at a question and say, boom, that's pool, that's server, that's, whatever. You actually have to take in a lot of visual information to be able to arrive at the answer. And so this is not a retired question. This is just something from Eric's notes that I kind of put together, but also back into all the solutions. What is the TCP send buffer? And so if you look at the TCP profile, there's all kinds of default options, and one of those is or there's not necessarily the default, but a lot of options that you can tune on the TCP stack. And the send buffer is one of those. And so, you have 4 options here in the question. And let's read through those real quick. A memory location where the product of a data link's capacity and its round trip time delay is stored. Okay. A memory location where data that is not ready to be sent to a remote host is stored. Okay. A memory location where all data sent to a remote host but not yet acknowledged by that host is stored. And then a memory location where the maximum size window BGP will advertise is stored. Okay, so let's go through these. All right, so this first one here, that's the bandwidth delay product. You can use that, calculating your link capacity, your round trip time, because if you have customers who are coming in from 300 milliseconds away versus 10 milliseconds away, well, that behavior is going to be significantly different. And so maybe you send the ones that are 10 milliseconds away, you have a different profile than the ones that are 300 milliseconds away, so that you can help them achieve the best characteristics for that profile. And so maybe you end up in a redirect of services for them. But that is not the answer that we're looking for here. All right, the receive window there is the maximum size will advertise, so that's not it. That this last one here, data that is not ready to be sent to a remote host, that's the proxy buffer. So we have, the proxy buffers, we have the send buffer, and then of course the answer there is all data sent to a remote host but not yet acknowledged by that host. Okay, and we'll dig into that in a little bit here in a second. We have a comment here. Aurelian, hi all, long time no see. Yes, welcome back. It's been a while. Thanks for weighing in here. And absolutely, practice is the way to go. I had a coach in high school. You hear the phrase, practice makes perfect. And my football coach, he's like, no, perfect practice makes perfect. And, not that you can ever be perfect, but his point on that is, you want to practice like you play, and there's teams that do that are pretty successful. Unlike, I don't know if you've seen the famous the clip where I think it was, I don't know if it was Allen Iverson, it was one of the NBA players, and he just went on for like 45 seconds to a minute. It's like, practice. You're talking about practice. It's like, and he was like, hey, this is practice. It's no big deal. I'll turn it on in the game. And for the most part, he did. But practice, especially from a team perspective, you get better through practice. And so that's the thing I'd recommend again, Shashank, Aurelian, dead on. Practice. Get into the big IP. Do all the things. Do all the things, and you'll be good to go. All right. So this is a representation, and this is from an article from Martin Duke. If you have not read Martin Duke's TCP articles on DevCentral, you should. Of course, I would prefer you read mine as well. I did a investigating the LTM profile series a long time ago. In fact, for this particular test, the 301B, it's still relevant because that I think is on 12.1. Or maybe 11.5. I think the 301B is still on 11.5. So most of that information back then is relevant. And that's the other thing when you're taking tests. You have to be relevant to the test from a version perspective, because as Martin talks about in a lot of his articles, there's new features and new tuning that comes along in newer versions. Like 13, they introduced a lot of new default, or a lot of new TCP profiles that they've learned over the years that perform really well on generic across the board traffic. I think the TCP progressive profile is one that they've had really good success with across the board, no matter what the characteristics of the lines are. So rather than just using default TCP, you move to one of the other profiles. And again, for that one, test. And I'll tell a story here in a minute of in my customer days about that. But this is kind of the flow. You have on the incoming from the server side, you have the reassembly queue. and then it hits the proxy buffer, and then the send buffer, and on. And then, of course, the reverse, coming from the client side, you have the reassembly queue, and then the proxy buffer and the send buffer. And so the send buffer, if you think about it, it's the unacknowledged data. And for those of us who are here in the United States and have experienced the United States Postal Service, sometimes the service is not all that awesome. And one of the services that they sell, and I think maybe it was a bolt-on after UPS had so much traction with customers, is the ability to track packages. But the reality is, with USPS tracking, it's kind of a useless service. You have no idea where your package is, and you're not going to get an acknowledgement until it's like, oh, hey, it's been delivered. Hey, that's great. Thanks. I'm so thankful for that service. But the send buffer is kind of like that. We've sent something, it's out there in the ether, but we don't know that it's been received. And so you have to store up that data until it's been acknowledged, because if it's not acknowledged, say, there was an accident, I heard a report there was snow in Ohio today and Michigan. So it's April 1st, it's spring, everything should be like 75 degrees and everybody's in shorts and t-shirts and loving life, but it's snowing. And so maybe this truck hit a snow pocket and rolled off the road and burst into flames, and your package is toast. So, if you want your receiving party to receive what you sent, you will send it again. Same is true of the send buffer. If we don't get acknowledged of that, you got to retransmit some of that data. So that data has to be available. And that's where the send buffer comes in. Now, the proxy buffer is kind of the intermediary between the receiving from the server side and the sending to the client side. And if you think about like a crossing guard or a traffic cop, the crossing guard knows that students need to move from one side of the street to the other. And so if you have, you hit your threshold of how many students you can let into the street at a time, then, you will put up a stop sign. And of course, the crossing guard is there to stop cars so they don't run over students. But if you'll like shift that just a little bit with me, you need to be able to get a certain amount of students across the road in time to still let the cars get through, so cars don't get aggressive and run over kids and everybody's crying, and we don't want any of that. So, you'll put up the stop sign saying, hey, I need you to stay over there and wait until I have another window of opportunity. Once the crosswalk's cleared and I've let some cars through, then I'll let you go through. So when the proxy buffer high hits that limit, that's when the TCP will say, hey, stop. And so, it will not increment that receive window, right? It'll say 0, don't send me anything else. And that indicates over to the server side that it should not send anything else. And so then when you hit the proxy buffer low, well, that's when say, okay, I can start receiving things. So now I'll start to advance that window again. And so now, it's like, come on, go, go, go. You get the really excited traffic cops who dance while they're signaling. That's when that hits. And so you want a little bit of space between your proxy buffer high and proxy buffer low. Martin mentions, a good sweet spot there is about 64K. And that way, you don't have this constant, if you troubleshoot monitor, sometimes you have them like bouncing all the time. You don't want that behavior with your TCP stop, go, stop, go, stop, go. So you need a little bit of space so that, it can flow a little bit better. All right. So that is the proxy buffers and send buffers. And again, I'm going to link Martin's articles in the show notes at the end. But that's a series from Martin that you will not want to miss. He's really good at detailing not just the overall concepts, but also putting some math in there for all us math nerds out there. And let's see. Did I miss a question in there? Dynamic record sizing for TLS. Not explained well. No one knows what to expect from it. Earlian, shoot me an email, j.rom@f5.com. I'll dig into that. I'm not really sure what you're asking there. but shoot me an email and I'll dig into that. Give me as many details as possible. All right. So here's another one about TCP. And this one actually is from an article from my good friend Rodrigo, who is no longer with us. He moved on, but his legacy continues. So for the packet capture below, select the missing sequence and acknowledgement numbers. And this, of course, is from exam objective. It's a little squishy with exact objective, but it's somewhere between 2.11, 2.12. Given a trace and necessary supporting documentation, determine solution to an application problem. And so if I'm looking at this trace and looks like I've got my three-way handshake right here at the beginning, and then I'm going to push, looks like that push is some data. Maybe it's an HTTP request. And then I get an acknowledgement to that. And then boom, I'm going to send some data back with that. And then from the client side, I'm going to acknowledge that. And so, what we're asking here is what are these actual sequence numbers and acknowledgements going to be? And so we have ACK. So in order, there's like 4 missing there. If you look, sequence 1 ACK equals, and that's blank, and then sequence 1 and that's blank. Looks like both of those are in the same direction. And then on the last little line there, the last acknowledgement, the sequence and ACK are blank. And so we have 4 options here. And Rodrigo goes into this, but if you're looking at Wireshark, by default, you'll see relative sequence numbers. And this is where it will take away the ridiculously long numbers that sequence numbers are, and it'll set them relative to 0, so that they're just kind of easier to keep track of as you're doing analysis. And so, I won't build all through that, but the last answer there is the acknowledgement is 94 for both of those, because you build your acknowledgement off the length of the data, right? And so 93 plus 1 there is a 94. And then the sequence number coming back on that last one is 94. But then I've got to add the 334 to the previous sequence number, which makes that 335. And so, that, again, that's practice. That's being able to read captures and go into the details of how those are built, how they interact. There's some messages that do not increment sequence numbers, like your handshake stuff usually only has it only pushes when there's data. The exceptions there, like the SYN-ACK, and then I think a FIN might push a single byte, but that's practice. That's being in packet captures and being able to read through. All right, let's go on to some Q&A. 0 windows. Yes, there's great information on 0 windows, Aurelian, on Martin's articles. I'll link those, and they're high quality. It's like what's his face, Adam Sandler from Waterbar. That's some high quality H2O. Martin Duke has some high quality content in his TCP articles, so check those out. All right, moving on to Q&A. Aurelian, I see your notes there. TCP Keep Alive, absolutely. If you would like to see more like TCP based content, let us know in the comments. And then, we can update some old articles or just do some examples. Maybe it'd be fun to just do a whole show on analyzing TCP captures. We'll bring on some of our network support experts who are in packet captures all day long. They eat, breathe, and sleep those things. And so we'll bring them on to do some awesome packet analysis with us. That'd be fun. All right. So this one is, when should I create a new virtual server versus adding rules to a policy? This one is interesting. And again, this one isn't even on DevCentral. This one's out on Network Engineering Stack Exchange. This one actually Chase Abbott sent to me. And this one is kind of, where do I draw the line between extending policies or iRules versus just splitting out application services across virtuals? And the punt answer, the political answer there, I guess, is, well, it depends. It really depends on how your design and operational teams are stood up. And it depends on how big you want the objects to be versus how many objects you want, because something's going to grow, right? You're going to have more objects in your configuration with the virtual approach, or you'll have bigger objects in your policy approach. And it also depends on your operational rules of control. Who manages the policies? Who manages the iRules? Who builds the virtual servers? If that's all the same team, well, that's a moot point. But if those are different teams, well, then you have lines of control that may not, left hand, right hand talking to each other. So there are business reasons, there's technical reasons why you might do one versus the other. If we're talking about strictly technical reasons and not lines of control, you will get best performance out of using just a virtual server, because that can, it has very little analysis to do. If you're sending it to a virtual and it's going to its own dedicated already default pool, then it doesn't really have to look into a policy or an iRule in order to make the decision. The decision's already made. And of course, a policy will make that decision maybe a little faster than an iRule. But one of the other things to consider is where a data group is pretty efficient. You do have to call the tickle engine on the iRule side to do that, but you can also integrate data groups into the policy, keep the policy down. So there's a lot of different ways you can approach things. It just, at the end of the day, depends on your needs and the way that your business does business. And of course, I did mention it in that thing on Stack Exchange. One of the things that I maybe a lot of people don't know is, like, policies are compiled per virtual. So even if you have the same policy and it's a really, really large policy, but it's applied to like 100 virtuals, well, that one very large policy is going to be compiled 100 times. And so at compile time, you might have some issues on the system. And if it's a really large policy and even more iRules, you might end up with timeouts trying to get that thing compiled. So, you have to be careful and make sure you test. All right, let's see. I haven't seen anyone using packet filters. All right. Aurelian, packet filters, are they really used somewhere? Some people do use the packet filters, and I'm guessing this is like the LTM low-level packet filters. I personally haven't ever used them in an operational environments. I was in the customer side for many years, and I didn't personally use them. And I don't work on the sales side, so I don't get to see all the niche use cases. But I do know from just internal discussion boards that they are used, and some people do use them. I haven't used them personally. Is that still a question when AS3 is around the corner? Which question? The one about, should I create a new virtual server versus adding rules to a policy? Let me know on that, Daniel. And I think it is. I know that the goal for everybody, if this particular question is what you're saying about AS3, I think it is still relevant, because not everybody's ready for that. I know that the industry is trending that way. AS3 is helping to get there for our customers, and the declarative model, I think, is the end goal for everyone. But imperative model has been around for forever, and there's a lot of people still really comfortable with that. And I don't know if you've seen the Shawshank Redemption, where Brooks and Red are almost kind of institutionalized in the walls of the prison. They're so used to that, anything outside of that feels a little uncomfortable and even scary. And so I think the imperative model will be around for quite a while because of those things. And not only that, but just the effort to lift in some of these really large enterprise environments who've been doing business a certain way. Those things just don't move overnight. If it's greenfield or your smaller environments, I think that you're going to see leading on that front. Okay, let's move on. Replacing an iRule with a policy. This one was interesting. This was a question where they're like, I've got an iRule, and I want to make sure if the GeoIP country code is not in my data group, then I want you to reset traffic. And in the GUI, if you set is instead of is not, the in data group allows you to do that. But as soon as you set it to is not, that option disappears. And it's like, how do I do this? And so it, from the Abed who asked the question, he's like, well, I don't know that there's really a solution for me. I did pose a solution. What I did is I went out and set it up in the policy to just be the country code is the data group. And then I went and modified that in the, in TMSH, and just added the not keyword to that. And you can see it there. It took into the config. What I don't know is, because I haven't tested it, I don't know if it actually functions on the TMSH side. And so he's going to test that and get back to me. But then also, the interesting thing that happens is then it actually does show up in the GUI with it is not. But if you then take that rule and you edit in any way, then that option disappears. So it looks like a UI bug to me. I think it probably does work, but I'll wait to hear back on it. But it's interesting to see little things like that come up. And of course, it's a complex product. There's a lot of things in it. Things are going to get missed or tweaked, and those things happen. So waiting to hear back on him for that. What is the REST API to set custom profile options checkbox? So if you create if you're working in the GUI and you create a profile, then and this is my plug too. Don't change the default profiles. Always create a child and then make changes in the child. And so what happens is, if you create a child of a default profile, then you have these little checkboxes on the side that allow you to say, hey, custom, I want to change the default. And so he's like, hey, I want to use the REST profile, not the GUI. How do I set that checkbox? And the reality is that that's just a way of doing business in the UI that's not necessary in the command line. And so that is, when you use TMSH to set up profiles, all the defaults are there. If you just create a child, it's not going to show you everything that exists in that profile. It's just going to show you the things that you set custom. Unless, now you can do a list and use the all dash properties option, and then you'll see them all. But as far as what it stores in the config, because it knows that the parent has all those properties, it doesn't really need to do anything in the config to show you that. And so it's not really, it's just really an artifact of the UI. You don't need that. So there's no reason, there's no need, or there's no availability to set that in the REST API, because it doesn't exist from that perspective. Hopefully that makes sense. Let's see. I haven't seen anyone using multipath TCP. Any realistic use case? Yeah, I think for mobile that's pretty prevalent. I haven't used that either, but I think mobile is the use case there. Aurelian. All right. Here's use the LTM policies to create a virtual listening on specific parts. Okay. This one kind of blew my mind. It was like maybe a month ago. And I saw it that day. It's like, I got to write an article about this, because I love it when I learn new things in the product that I didn't know existed. And this is one of those. So the question was, I want a single virtual server to listen on many things, which is contrary to what we just talked about a few minutes ago. It's like, hey, I have a virtual doing all these things, and I want to stop that and have a virtual for specific. Reverse case here. They want to like combine everything onto a virtual. How do I do that? And so traditionally for me, for many years, it's like, okay, well, I can do that in iRule, and I can do that in a policy. And so what you do is you just have the virtual server listen on port 0, and then in the iRule or the policy, you can specify, hey, in the condition that I have port 80, I want you to go ahead and allow that, and I want you to forward it on to this pool. Or if I listening on port 8080, I also want you to go ahead and handle that traffic and send it on to this different pool. Otherwise, I want you to go ahead and reset traffic and get out of there. Simon Blakely brought up this thing called traffic matching criteria, and I saw that and I was like, I have never heard those words. And I've been here a long time, and so I don't know what version. I probably should have looked that up. I don't know what version traffic matching criteria was introduced in. But basically, what it allows you to do is it allows you to specify like a destination address list, destination port list. You can also do source address and port lists. And then when you're building the virtual server, instead of setting a destination host or a source host, you can use these address lists. And so it basically allows you to create one virtual that can span multiple IPs and ports, which is pretty incredible and awesome. And if you do it via the GUI, it will create that for you, that traffic matching criteria object in TMSH. It'll create it for you by just selecting your address lists and port lists, and then it'll name it after your virtual server, and it puts the TMC for the traffic management criteria. You don't have control over the naming of that object when you do it in the GUI. If you do it via the command line in TMSH, you can create that object yourself, and you can name it how you want to name it. But in the article I went through with the virtual server and with the iRule and the policy options, holy cow, we're at 3:07. How in the world did I lose track of time like that? We're already way over, but we're going to keep going. If you got to go, I understand. You can catch me later. I'm going to keep going because I got some. I want to finish up strong. But this one, you have the iRule and the policy, and the way they reset the traffic is a little bit different than how the traffic matching criteria does. With the iRule and the policy, it's actually waiting for you finish the connection. It actually, you get into that request, and TCP handshake has already happened, and then it resets traffic. So you do see on the wire that first HTTP request in the test traffic that I sent. With the traffic matching criteria, it's I don't even have time for that. You send me a request. If it's not something that's in my, if it's not matching, boom, we're done. We're done here. So it's going to save some resources on the wire by cutting that off earlier. So anyway, completely new way to be able to handle multiple ports on a single server. Did not know about it. Wrote it up. It's out there. I think it's still on the front page, but that's the title of the article there. 3 ways to specify multiple ports to a virtual server. So check that out. And then is there a way, advanced there, is there a way to query the availability status timestamp via iControl REST? This is one that was actually on an internal list today. And I was like, well, that's curious. And so if you notice when you go to your pool members in the GUI, you get this, hey, this is available and enabled. And oh, by the way, here's the timestamp of when it was either, last successful or last failed. But if you go look at the TMSH output of show pool member or pulling that via REST, that information is nowhere to be found. And so I was just kind of digging around. And if you go to LTM monitor TCP HTTP stats, well, that API anonymous attribute that it returns has that exact information in that feedback. Now you've got to parse all that because that's just one long string. So I don't think that's going to be terrible, but it's not going to be fun to parse that out. But that data is available on via REST if you get at it slightly differently, and then you just have to be able to marry that data to your pool member. So you have a little bit of parsing to pull out the specifics, then you have a little bit of mapping to do between pool members and that information. So not terrible, but it is something that you'll need to do a little bit more manually. Sometimes the things in the GUI, they're pulling pieces from everywhere to make it nice for you. Whereas if you're going to do that on the command line, it's kind of on your own. All right. This one I had a question on, and really the big thing I wanted to do there, and then we'll get out of here, is I wrote an article a while ago about dealing with records in data groups. And for the longest time, didn't think it was possible to update individual records in data groups via REST, because if you look at the object that's returned by Big IP, the records are a list. They're not they're not individual subrecords. And so because of that, you can't post those separate from the object. And there's a couple, I wrote an article also there. It's working with subsets of data group records. And then I've been back and forth with one person via email who's like, man, I'm really just, it's Kay Jeglinski, and I'm just having trouble, figuring out how to do this. One approach was to upload a TMSH script onto the big IP, and then you can interact with that script by passing data to it, and then it will use TMSH to pass those records in individually. And then the other way is just to use the request parameters and using the options keyword, and then that way you can pass them in the URL. But if you do that second one, and that's the question that they got, if you just send the URL, Big IP sends a 400 and saying, hey, I need a request body. Now, there's nothing you're sending in the request body because you're doing it all on the URL, but it just needs an empty payload and to make it happy. So if you send it all in the options, all the records that you want to send, then it's good to go. The challenge that you might have with that is depending on, I don't know that the max URL length is on iControl REST, but if you're sending lots and lots and lots of records, like a really big data group, you may violate a profile issue, and so that would be the only challenge on that front with it not being in a payload. So anyway, that was that's the end of what I have there. So that brings us to the end of the show. We went long today. 3:12. So I apologize for keeping you longer, but I had a lot of content that I was excited about. Tell me what you're excited about. What do you want to learn about? I see, definitely some more interest in TCP and getting into that. Let me know either in the comments here or, after the show, if you want to comment below. What do you want to know about? What do you have questions about that has just been in the back of your mind forever, and you just haven't gotten a solid answer from anybody? I don't know that I have that answer necessarily, but I'll find it if I can find somebody who can help you out. So thank you for joining me today. Again, DevCentral Connects, we're back here next Thursday for our normal show. We're here Tuesday, 10 a.m. with Tyler Hatton from WWT to do a lab on microservices, securing modern apps and microservices with Nginx. So thank you. Appreciate y'all being here, and we'll see you out there in the community. Thank you. Bye.